Welcome to Backroom Talk.
So CJ participated in the '07 games, did a lot of cool things inside of the CrossFit community, built this awesome brand, and is now owning and running and is the visionary behind Invictus Fitness.
Of course, when coronavirus hit, it was just kind of a seamless transition into really having to dig deeper.
Obviously, Eric seems like a great guy, but what would you like to see him put in place?
First and foremost, leadership and professionalism. I think people are really quick to criticize CrossFit, right? They're like, oh, what do we get? I'm like, first of all, you're paying $3,000 a year.
To listen to more Backroom Talk, be sure to subscribe. Learn to design personalized programs with the OPEX system of coaching by heading to opexfit.com.
Cool, man. Yeah, I think most people watching or listening, they know who you are and all of that. But give us a quick little intro. Who is CJ, and what do you do? Where'd you come from? Whatever's relevant, man.
Well, gosh, first and foremost, I guess now I'm a father of two kids, 5 and 7-year-olds that are super awesome. My other baby has been Invictus for the last 12 years. We started Invictus at the end of 2008. And it's been a wild ride on both fronts of parenting a young business and growing it, and then bringing kids along, midway through that process. And it's been a ton of fun. I think the growth stages are super rewarding because you're constantly making mistakes, constantly learning, and then you get some time to sit back and reflect. And then, of course, 2020, we've had the opportunity to sit back and deal with some adversities. And like, this sounds terrible. I know there are people that are really struggling, but like, it's been awesome because our whole brand, the whole reason we started Invictus was about, conquering yourself, right? Making sure that you were the master of your fate and that you controlled what you were, presented and the things that you could control. And 2020 has just been an awesome opportunity to walk the walk, right? And just make the most out of every situation. And we've done that, and it's been really rewarding to see, both team members thrive because they've been given a different opportunity to present themselves and to communicate to members. And then to see our members just really, embrace the philosophy and the principles and keep moving and keep doing their thing.
It is weird to think that 2020 brought opportunities, but I think, across the board with a lot of people and organizations and companies, it really has. What were those opportunities that 2020 brought you that you guys didn't have in 2019?
Yeah. So, well, one, I'm going to back it up even before. So in December of 19, we try to have like an annual initiative that says, hey, these are the things that are going to be most important to us this year as a team. And our 2020 initiative was to create deeper relationships with our members, right? And in summary, it was that each coach was responsible to change 50 lives. And that's all I wanted them focused on. I didn't want people focused on getting new members or, building out a bigger book of business. I said, like, let's just really lean in to creating more impact with the people that have put their trust in us. And so we set out 2020 with that in mind, right? And then with that came a bunch of, new initiatives in terms of communication with members and how often we were talking to them one-on-one, how often they were receiving group communications from their individual coaches, because everybody in our gyms are kind of broken out and assigned a singular coach, as well as being able to come to group sessions. And so we started rolling with that, right? January, February, March comes around, and it was like, oh, okay, well, like, just keep rolling with it. Now you're just sending them workouts at their house. They're not coming into the gym, but your level of communication that we've already established just has to, improve. You have to continue to provide substantive content. You have to, continue to provide accountability and lots of check-ins. And so in many ways, we lucked into the timing of it, where we were really pushing that from the very beginning of 2020. And then of course when coronavirus hit, it was just kind of a seamless transition into really having to dig deeper. And I think, like I said, alluded to earlier, one of the really cool things that came with that is we have, we've got some amazing coaches, right? But when you put people into an adverse situation, you really see a lot more about their character. And my team just like absolutely rose to the occasion, like unbelievable in their care for members, in their communications, in the way that they, took care of a very diverse population. We had some people that weren't worried about being sick. We had other people that really needed a lot of care and had, underlying conditions or, really elderly loved ones. And watching our coaches really serve every member based on their needs, not our coach's personality or desires. It was just awesome. And so it's allowed me in the last few months to step back and say, man, we've got a team that is way stronger than we ever thought. And we thought we had a good team.
Could you give us like a little bit of context about what your team looks like, how many coaches you have, what your network of gyms actually is?
So in San Diego, we have 2 gyms. We have 2 gyms in Boston, and we have one new gym, which we opened August 1st in the Seattle area. And so, our teams are almost exclusively full-time coaches. We don't do, part-time coaches. Everybody that comes to work at Invictus is expected to be a professional, really dig in, do a ton of continuing education, share that education with their colleagues and our community, and make this their sole focus to be the best that they can be. And so we're lucky in that sense, is that it's really easy to maintain focus and organization, where I know there's a lot of gyms out there, boutique fitness gyms that are, maybe have a lot of part-time employees that have other jobs. It's tougher in some ways, I think, when coronavirus and all that hits, to keep them focused, because they've got to put their priorities in place. And so so for us, it's a network. We have really strong communications, especially the Seattle gym that just opened up, right? They're most of those coaches are a little newer, and so it's been awesome just to like really get to know them. And in many ways, because of some of the restrictions, as they're opening a new gym, to see them get a chance to know all of their members really in depth, because the group sizes are restricted to smaller sizes and all of that. So it's been really cool.
What does that model look like, CJ? So you have these gyms around the country. Are you guys all affiliated? What are the synergies between each of the locations, if any?
So it's a little different depending on the gym. So the Boston gyms have been around for a while. We've had a relationship for several years now. And those coaches are pretty far along. They understand the principles, the philosophy. They're awesome. Both operators, Josh Plosker, the gym owner, great coaches, and a really well-established community. So to be honest, like our communication is check-ins and stuff a little bit less involved. The Seattle gym, because it's just opening, a lot of those were newer to Invictus principles and philosophy. So we actually, one of the really cool things that's come out of COVID also is that we launched our Invictus University. And so like they're going through our Invictus University that lays out like all of the principles of, both from a cultural side of how do we communicate as a staff, how do we communicate with members, and then of course like the substantive side of coaching and how we run things and what kinds of customizations, regressions, and all of that stuff we do with members. And so we're very involved with Seattle, just because that level of engagement with a newer gym is more appropriate to make sure that they get up and running in the way that, you know, is going to make them most successful. Whereas Boston's a more, you know, mature community, and they're kind of rocking and rolling.
Yeah, Josh out in Boston, he's a great dude. I spent some time up there before they went to Invictus, but yeah, really good guy. So let's kind of rewind it a little bit. So we kind of got into the weeds with Invictus, but let's talk about who you are and what you did prior to competing in CrossFit and coaching in CrossFit, and you know, sitting in the seat that you're sitting in now. Where were you at like the day prior to understanding what CrossFit was? What were you doing?
Yeah, it was. So I grew up in sports, right? Played baseball in high school, college. Was very active in martial arts, taekwondo, a bunch of different things. Competed, boxed, and then you know, went to law school. And in the midst of law school, you know, kind of lost, you know, the ability to do a lot of competition as an athlete. And then took a job at an international law firm, and just for the first time in my life found myself super sedentary. I'd never been like a gym rat in the sense of going in and lifting weights. Like I was always one, I fought at featherweight, so I couldn't get too bulky. I had to keep my lean mass pretty low. And so I'd always done stuff just for function, right? Lots of sprints, lots of plyometrics, very little heavy loading. And then, so when I transitioned out of any sort of competitive athletics, and I'm sitting behind the desk for 14 hours a day, I would go over the 24-hour fitness, but I had no idea why I was there, right? It wasn't that I didn't want to be there. I would do stuff. I would go to work out every day, but I had no idea why. There was nothing motivating it. And it just seemed pointless. Like standing on a Bosu ball doing bicep curls, I was like, what the hell am I doing this for? How am I going to apply it? And so just really didn't have anything I loved. It was running some marathons just because I could, and was just really looking for something that would be better. And one of my colleagues had at the law firm had like come across the old Nasty Girls video with Annie and Eva and Nicole, and so he like showed me this. I'm like, dude, I think I've seen a place like this. There's an old warehouse, you know, there's ratty little facility. And so I drove by it that night, and sure enough, it was a CrossFit facility, just gross. I mean, mold everywhere, ceilings falling down. And that actually really spoke to me because when I was boxing, I boxed in Washington, D.C. in this just tiny little place above an auto garage. And I was like, yeah, like that's what it should be about. It's just more Spartan. It's more like about the actual workout instead of, you know, the aesthetics and everybody else around you. And so that was kind of day one back in 2006. And I said, oh, I'm going to give this stuff a shot. And, you know, went in, did my very first workout was Angie. So doing 100 pull-ups when you didn't know how to kip or anything was, you know, made that a long endurance event. Yeah, and so from there it just became, you know, something that I love doing, but certainly wasn't something that I saw as a career path. Right, I was doing very well as an attorney, enjoyed the work. It was intellectually stimulating, and then things turned a little bit when the owners of that CrossFit gym decided to move away. And I basically said, well, give me the keys. I'll open it up at 5:30 in the morning so people can work out when I'm working out. And then, you know, that lasted maybe 2 weeks, and you see people in there have no idea what they're doing. So you stop and you start helping them. So it eventually transitioned into me coaching very quickly for, you know, another gym, and doing that and running that gym for about 18 months before we finally decided, hey, we need to do this in a more responsible way and kind of chart our own path. We really wanted to make it accessible to more mainstream population. At the time, it was almost all like Navy, police officers. And I would try to talk my lawyer friends into coming down. But when you've got a place that, you know, doesn't have a bathroom, has mold on the floor, stuff like that, it's a harder sell for that population. And so we really wanted to kind of mainstream it, right? So our very first location, you know, it sounds silly now, but I think at the time in 2008, I think there may have been one other gym that I was aware of that had showers and locker rooms. But, you know, we had showers, locker rooms, towel service, you know, the whole deal, just so we could get, you know, mainstream working professionals into the gym.
So from 2008 to now, how has what you're doing in the classes with your clients evolved? Is it very similar, or have there been changes that have happened over the years?
Yeah, tons of changes, I think. When we first started in 2008, I don't think we even got a full year. In 2008, we just ran one workout, right? 2008, and I think half of 2009, we were just running like, you know, your typical workout of the day, and everybody would come in and you'd try to customize the workout enough so that it fit the individuals. And then at that point, right, my mom and dad were working out, and we had some older members, and I said, hey, we've got to shift this around, right? And I was in, you know, James and I met at the 2007 CrossFit Games. I went to his very first OPT course up in Calgary, you know, out at the house, which was just amazing. Like, so cool to be around people that were thinking, you know, ahead in this space and how to optimize it. And so, of course, you know, with some good mentorship and then noticing what, you know, I would want to do with my parents, we shifted the programming into two tracks of performance and fitness, right? With performance being what you would consider more traditional CrossFit, a little more CNS intensive, 1 rep maxes, Olympic weightlifting, higher complexity. And then our fitness program being really built more around a body comp template, more cellular style training, and no kipping gymnastics or anything like that, right? And so we made that shift, I think, back in 2009. And, you know, from there, we kept those two tracks. We added a competitive track once we realized that, you know, the sport was actually going to continue to be something other than just a bunch of guys showing up for fun, which is what it was for me. I was kind of, I don't know if I should be excited or embarrassed that they now have the leaderboards up for 2007 and 8, right? Like, I will be clear from the beginning, like, I really came at this more as a coach than an athlete. I just like to compete for the fun.
We actually dug into those a little bit a couple of weeks ago when we saw the 2007 reload, and we're looking at times, and of course a few years later they redid it, and then just kind of reflecting back on this weekend, Fraser had I think he had the same time as Marshall. Like, I think they had the exact same time with what the workout was in 2007 and versus 2020. So that was interesting to see, man. But yeah. Let's just say human beings have evolved a little bit in the sport.
In 2007, right? So I got there. I mean, I hadn't been doing CrossFit that long. I was coming from like a boxing marathon background. I was like 140 pounds, no strength training background. And when they announced 135-pound ground to overhead or shoulder to overhead, I was like, oh, I've never cleaned that. So I had no idea. I was like, well, how am I going to do that? And I went in the back, and Josh Everett was in the warm-up area, and I was like, I'm going to have to figure out how to clean this. And so that gave me a couple of tips, and I clean it the first time, and I jerk it, and you know, it was like a damn, you know, 1 rep max. And I looked over at Josh, goes, well, if you do it once, you could do it 35 times, just a matter of time. I'm like, I guess it's that simple.
In the next 30 minutes. That's good. If you were an attorney in 2020, right, and like this whole, and you're still going to 24-hour fitness and you get into CrossFit, obviously the space just looks a lot different than it did in 06. But would you, and you were still passionate about the sport or, you know, just the training methodology, would you do what you did in '06 and 2020? Would you quit your career as a successful attorney and kind of take this path that you've taken?
No, and just for really personal reasons, right? And so in 2008, when we started Invictus, right, I didn't have kids. I was at a point in my life that I could really just hit reset and be totally okay if I failed. That's an odd thing to say, but that was a motivating factor, was that I could do this and it was on me to sink or swim. And if I didn't make it, I could go back and I would be very successful as a lawyer or do whatever I needed to do. And in 2009, I have a very close friend who's very successful attorney at Nike, and he and I met for coffee, and he was like, "Hey man, I think I want to leave the law firm." And he was a lawyer at a firm in San Diego at the time, and he said, "I'm thinking about opening a gym," and but he had 3 kids and with a wife, and I was like, "Dude, like now's not the time," right? It's those initial years are lean and they're a grind, right? And so to do that now in 2020, looking at where I am with with a wonderful partner and 2 kids, I wouldn't do it because of the sacrifices that they would have to make. I was okay to work, to wake up at 5 and coach until 8 p.m. and fall asleep and do it again. But I wouldn't give up the time now with my family to, work an 18-hour day. And so I couldn't do it. I couldn't make the same commitment.
Has your involvement in the business shifted now that you are a parent and prioritizing time with your kids?
Yeah, for sure. It's something I've talked to with some of our, longest employees. We're blessed to have many of our original coaches still on 12 years later. And we've chatted about that. And there have been times like, could we have made more money? Could we have been more profitable? Could we open more gyms, been more successful? Like, absolutely. But there's always just this balance of like, hey, what am I willing to do? I know there are times that I drop the ball on projects that could be awesome, but it's like there's also I need to be home at 6 p.m. so that I can have some dinner with my kids, give them a bath, read them stories, and put them to bed. And so there's just not enough time in the day for me to just be all business all the time and still lead the life of the values and priorities that I want to establish.
Are you still coaching, CJ?
A little bit. So I'm not coaching, much on terms of group classes, except that, if we've got coaches out on vacation or something, I'll jump in. And so I know coming into the holiday season, I'll be able to jump in and coach on the floor a little bit. And then Saturday mornings, we still run a 7 a.m. comp class, which is just really fun for me to show up on 6:30 on a Saturday. The people that come at 7 a.m. on a Saturday they're motivated, they're fun people to coach, they want to be there, they want to get better. So that's a blast for me to coach. But unfortunately, with the growth of the business and doing other things, the online side, it's a little tougher to spend more hours out on the floor. So normally when I'm in the gym, I'll jump into, we also run, you had asked about programming, we also run sessions that are just like strength-based sessions, right? That are more, right, I think functional bodybuilding-esque in the way that they're structured, kind of strength structure workouts. And then we run just engine workouts. So I'll normally jump into our groups for those and get to see our coaches coach and get to hang out with members. And so that's more my way to be involved in the community, is just kind of hanging out and checking in with people when I'm in the gym versus being the lead coach on the floor.
CJ, what are those other things that you guys have going on outside of the gyms? Like, what are you guys doing online right now? You know, I think when people think about Invictus, I think they know that you have gyms, but they think about the online training that you're doing, the coaching, and how you guys have evolved that over the years. So, do you want to give us some insights into that?
Yeah, no, we get questions all the time. They're like, "Oh, where are you guys located?" I'm like, "Oh, cool," which is great. You know, they know about us from online, but they just had no idea where we started. But yeah, we've essentially tried to cater programs however we can to the community that is following us, right? And so over time, that started with just our competition program that was a 60 to 90-minute session 5 times a week for people that thought they wanted to compete in local throwdowns or the open or whatever. As the sport evolved, that turned into Invictus Athlete, which was really just the template of how we trained our team. So there was like a primary training and then options based on what each individual athlete needed, right? So that we could try to give individual customizations, but keep the group together so that everybody was training together. And that's, so for that program, they're training multiple times a day. And then we've got a masters community, so Invictus Masters, right? We see people that just struggle with gymnastics, so we started Invictus Gymnastics. We have Jared Enderton runs our Invictus weightlifting for people that just have to get better at weightlifting in order to either compete as weightlifters or to compete in CrossFit. And then we've got, our strength development. We've got just basically a program to kind of suit every need that we've seen athletes as they're coming up have deficiencies, and we want to make sure that we're able to provide something to help them move along.
Cool. Are you guys also doing one-to-one stuff? Like, could I hire one of you guys to coach me if I wanted to?
Yeah, so we still do. That was actually how we started, right? Much like in 2008 or 9, I think 8, I was working with James as, a one-on-one. And I was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. I had also been coaching from late 2007. I was coaching 2 friends that lived on the East Coast all online. And so that's really how we started. We did only exclusively one-on-one, individual program design and online coaching until I think about 2012, 13. And then we started doing group programs, because I'm sure, as you guys know, the cost of that has to be high because the time commitment of a coach on a one-on-one individual program design is quite high. I've always joked, I think it's a terrible business model because we end up spending a massive amount of time with one individual client online versus these group programs, right, where you're providing options, but ultimately you get a lot more people into the program, right? It's much like the gym situation and one-on-ones versus group coaching.
Cool, man. Yeah, I think it made me think, when you start talking about, getting online programming in 07, 08. I wonder, was there programming prior to, because it's like, oh, what'd you do? Like send emails and all that. Like, I wonder if there was ever like a USPS program design where it's like, CJ's programming for me. He sends me like in this little manila folder, like the golden design. It gets there 4 days later. I'm like, ooh, yeah. And then I go and I send back my results. I wonder if that was ever a thing prior to internet.
No, I know for me, it was just like muscle and fitness, right? You see whatever they posted, like, I'm going to do that. Yeah. Yeah, no, I always, James would send me just an email, right, with a list of workouts. And then I would format it into a spreadsheet and send it back to him. Because I couldn't stand.
Like, hey, dude, just put this in a spreadsheet, man.
I couldn't stand his minimalist email. I was like, I can't track anything on this.
CJ, nothing has changed, dude. Nothing has changed. Now you might get a text message. You might get a text message now. Oh man. Yeah. What are some misconceptions of Invictus?
Oh man. I think the biggest one that we've had over the years is that like we're catering to the elite, right? I think that, it's been awesome. We've had some really successful athletes. But there's almost been like, we hear all the time, like, oh yeah, I'm going to jump onto the Invictus athlete program, once I get good enough to do that. And you're like, no, okay, like we have all these programs for development, right? But I think that's probably been the biggest one. It's affected our gym locations because they've seen us as a competitive gym, when 99.5% of our members have zero interest in ever competing. We run fitness classes, we run all these classes that don't have anything to do with CrossFit. And yet, because the public presence is, they've got a bunch of competitors. That's certainly been a misconception that we've tried to knock down over the years.
How have you gone about trying to knock that down?
It's tough. I'm not sure we've done it well, but I think we've just tried to do it because we give the exact same level of care and principles to every member, regardless of what they're looking for. And the funny thing is, honestly, our competitive program, we competed at the 2009 games, right? Which was 7 months after we opened. And like, nobody was an athlete. There was no sport then, right? Like nobody was making money. And so we treated every member, right? Like our core principles were education, support, and encouragement for every member, right? You've got to make sure that they're educated in the best methods and principles. You've got to make sure that they have a support network around them of not only coaches, but, health professionals, acupuncturists, like all of these things to make sure they stay healthy. And then encouragement. And that's really comes through the community being a very inclusive community, open to having anybody from all walks of life. And so those three pillars, education, support, and encouragement, is what we started all of our programs. In fact, one of our first programs that I ran was a weight management clinic. It was for people that were over 50 pounds overweight. And so it was like, those were the pillars. And then we had people that were like, hey, should we do this CrossFit Games thing in the summer? And we're like, yeah, cool. Okay, here are the three pillars. They're education, support, and encouragement. And we've just done that exact same thing with everybody, whether they're coming to us for nutrition and want to lose weight, whether they're coming into, in their 70s trying to just stay mobile and active, or whether they're trying to go to the CrossFit Games, our method has been exactly the same. And so it takes a while for people have to actually experience it to see that we don't really care how good you are in order to give you that level of care. But that's been our approach is, hey, we're going to treat everybody the same. If you come on and, your 1 rep max clean and jerk like mine at the 2007 games is 135 pounds, awesome. Our goal is just to help you improve, right?
So from the outside looking in, CJ, Invictus is a very established brand in the CrossFit space. And I know, like me personally, in my days coaching CrossFit, I visited your website countless times. I'm curious to know, like, what is it about Invictus that let you guys create this brand inside of CrossFit? Was it right time, right place? Were there any specific actions or qualities that you can attribute your success to?
Yeah, I think, culturally, right, I hope that culturally all of our coaches and myself have a humility in that we don't think we know everything. We're always keen to learn from a wide variety of sources. And that was honestly how we started, is that I went through all of the CrossFit Journal in, the matter of months. And then I was like, hey, the biggest problem back in 2007-8 with CrossFit is that it had no credibility from strength and conditioning professionals. But most CrossFit coaches couldn't answer the questions that strength and conditioning professionals were asking because nobody was educated, more traditionally either, right? Which is something that James really had going for him is that he was traditionally educated in strength and conditioning, and he could answer the questions and he could talk about why we were doing things and why they were better. And he could also, with a critical eye, say, hey, actually, maybe we shouldn't be doing some of these things, right? And so that was kind of how we started as well, was, hey, we're gonna learn from everybody, right? We expected people to go through Gray Cook stuff and get their CSCS and do all of these things and bring all of that back to the table so that we could have an honest conversation about, is that better? Is there any merit to that? Or is that just textbook BS, right? And then we'll make our own decisions about what works well and what doesn't. And so all along, I think we've taken this approach that we're going to learn from everybody. We're going to be very generous in sharing our knowledge. So I think one of the biggest things that we did to boost our brand was that from day one, we've posted a minimum of 5 articles a week on, what we're doing and what we're learning and, what we're sharing with our members. And so, people like yourself would come to the website because hopefully there was information on there that was useful to them. And so that's what it's been all about for us, is learning and then sharing what we know so that other people can utilize that information to be better at what they do, whether they ever become part of our community, in San Diego or online.
Where's focus at right now for you, CJ, in terms of your brick and mortars and your online business? Is it 50-50, or are you kind of growing one a little bit more than the other? Like, where do you sit on that?
Yeah, so right now, actually, it's transitioning really into kind of an education, right? And that came about with Boston and Seattle saying, hey, if we're going to be able to share what we know on a greater platform, we need to start teaching, right? We need to start really putting together everything we've done over the last 12 years and explaining how we did that, why we did that, why we have certain systems in place. And so that's really where our focus is right now. I'm not sure, it's not a revenue generating focus right now, right? Our online, we have an awesome team. I'm still deeply involved in the online stuff. Our operations team in San Diego is really strong. And so I kind of have the ability to step out of day to day on that stuff and provide a lot more of the strategic assistance, and then really get to push with some of our really talented coaches are really driving Invictus University because they're the ones that are on the floor every day and managing people. And so I get to assist with that. But that's really probably the focus going forward right now, is really getting that put together, finalizing everything through, our Seattle locations, and then figuring out where we go with it from there.
Cool. Are all of your gyms still affiliated with CrossFit?
Yeah. So none of our gyms are up until January. So when everything shook down this summer with Greg Glassman, we stated that we were going to move forward solely as Invictus Fitness and start that process. We did start that process, went through all of the SEO and all of the implications, which are way more complicated than I think a lot of people on the interwebs like to imagine. Like, well, you said you were going to move forward like yesterday, so why haven't you removed everything? You're like, you got 12 years of content on your website. Like, that's a little harder to do. And so we started that process, right? I've had amazing conversations with Eric Rosa. He by both research, contacting references, and then my personal communications with him. He's been nothing but, great to work with, seems really headed in the right direction. So, I was honest and said, like, hey, we're going to see what happens now since the change. But in many ways, we called for the change, we got the change. I think it would be a little bit pig-headed just to carry through and drop all affiliations just because we said that given the changed circumstances. So we're going to see how the year plays out, but in all likelihood, we'll continue to affiliate with CrossFit based on my conversations with Eric and the direction I think he's taken things in.
What would you like to see that direction be? Like, obviously, Eric seems like a great guy, but what would you like to see him put in place?
First and foremost, leadership and professionalism, right? We have to get to a place where we can look at the organization and say, hey, like the things that are important to me, right? One being inclusion, right? That we have to be open to changing everybody's lives, right? And there's a way to go about that with integrity and dignity. And so that's first and foremost. I think he's going to do that. He's clearly a very well-educated, well-spoken leader. But the other things are, right, is like we've seen the drop of sponsors and media when all that went down. That's a huge part that will go into play, especially around the competitive piece, but to exposure in general for CrossFit. And it looks like he's doing a good job of rebuilding that. But what I'd love to see is that, we should see brands eager to engage with the CrossFit Games, with the athletes and with the organizations, because they believe in the mission, not backing away because they're scared of the volatility or lack of predictability that they might see from the organization.
Yeah, good points in there, man. I think you set yourself up really well, right? Where it's like January rolls around and you're like, I'm going to move forward with Invictus Athlete. Like, you're fine. You can do that because you have a very, very well-established brand. What would your advice be for, the typical CrossFit affiliate that reaches out and they're like, hey, what should I do? Like, I'm kind of scared. I don't believe in these things. I want to disassociate myself. But if I do disassociate myself, I lose the name, I lose the brand. What would your advice be to those people?
Look, I had a lot of those conversations.
I suspected
back whenever that was, and I'll be really like, maybe I shouldn't, but I'll be super candid, right? There were many ways in which it would have benefited Invictus had CrossFit continued to go down that path, because I got a lot of people reached out, hey, can I become an Invictus facility? Can I, do these other things? But at the end of the day, my concern was with those community members, right? I've got friends in San Diego that own gyms in San Diego that were in that position. They were like, dude, what am I if I'm not a CrossFit affiliate, right? And I'm like, well, that's cool. Then that's why we were fighting for change and saying, hey, no, people do care about CrossFit, so let's make CrossFit right, versus just breaking away and being like, yeah, they suck, come join us, right? And so really my interest was in protecting some of those guys, right? Because I've been blessed to make great friends in this industry through CrossFit, and I respect that if they're CrossFit, city name, whatever, that's important for them and their branding. Long term, of course, I think that we owe it to our communities and to our coaches to become something, right, that is bigger than just a brand name, right, and that gives back to that brand name. And in many ways, that's what we've tried to do, right? Like when we changed our programming in 2009, that wasn't to like poke our thumb at CrossFit. That was to say like, hey, this is how we're going to do it because we think this upgrades it for everybody else. And we made it free on our website. And so I would love to think that every gym maybe got their eyes open, like, hey, we have to be able to stand on our own. And if we agree and align in values, then because we stand on our own, it makes the whole thing stronger.
Yeah, I think it opened a lot of people's eyes to that, right? Because it's some gym owners, and I talked about it with a couple people. It's like some gym owners use that, the fallout of Greg Glassman, I won't even say CrossFit, but the fallout of Greg Glassman as an opportunity to disassociate themselves because they've been wanting to do it for years, right? But they're just like, I don't want to pull the trigger because I feel like right now isn't the time. So I think that gave a lot of people the opportunity to do it and to not get snuffed at by doing it, right? So I think a lot of the gyms that did disaffiliate and didn't come back, I think they were on their way out anyway. They just needed a reason to be out. But good point in like, hey, build your brand, right? It's like you can't count on CrossFit bringing members into your door. You can't count on CrossFit giving you X amount of support because that's just not reality. So I think it opened up a lot of eyes.
I think people are really quick to criticize CrossFit about that, right? They're like, oh, what do we get? I'm like, first of all, you're paying $3,000 a year. Like, if you think you're going to pay $3,000 a year and get a, built-in business that is just going to thrive with you barely showing up, like, there's some expectations that need to be severely altered there, right? Like, and so I think when you look at it, you say like, hey, what's reasonable? What's reasonable is you should run a great business regardless of whether you have CrossFit on your door or not. And if you love the values, if you believe in what's happening, you believe in the direction, then you should proudly, put that up there. And if you don't, that shouldn't affect your business one way or the other. And I do think it was eye-opening, but I think for CrossFit, it could potentially make our entire community stronger if people choose to do that, knowing that they don't have to, right? If you are reliant on that name and you think the $3,000 you pay a year is going to keep your business alive, I think that's a pretty broken system to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts on the direction, sport-wise, that CrossFit is going right now? Like, how do you feel about the sport? Are you still involved in it? Do you still have athletes involved in it? What does that look like for you?
That's tricky, man. Like, I'll just be honest. Like, I've seen it from day one, right? I mean, this 2007, I got to participate and have some fun at the games, and I've seen all of the growth, and I love the growth. I mean, when we step back and look like at how much has changed in a relatively short amount of time and how big this thing has gotten, it's unbelievable. There are some downsides to that. I mean, the fact that this is more of a business, the fact that there's a lot of athletes that care as much about their Instagram following as they do about their progress, that stuff makes it really hard for me. I don't care. I don't do social media. I'm not in the gym to try to really push people's individual brands. Like, I want to come into the gym and know that all we're trying to do is make people better at whatever goal. If their goal is to, climb mountain peaks, then we're going to get them fit to do that. If their goal is to win the CrossFit Games, then we're going to do that. We're going to do everything we can to do that. So I would be lying if I said like, oh, I'm totally all in on the games. It's been an interesting 12 years in which I have to reflect, hey, how do my personal values run with some of the, the needs of the athletes, right? This is a full-time job for these, for these games athletes at this point. And yes, I do still work with some of the games athletes, and they're so incredible, right? Like Kristen Holta, like, she is beyond reproach in any aspect of her life. She's an amazing human being. So like, there are people like Kristen, I still work with Reagan Huckabee. There are people that like I will be the biggest fans and supporters of for the rest of my life, whether I'm coaching them or not. But there's also, I'm 43. This is maybe a younger man's sport. I've got a phenomenal Tino Marini, who runs our athlete development, is just closer to it than I am at this point. And so I kind of made the decision last year to step away from coaching, doing the majority of the like one-on-one coaching with athletes, to really just kind of, being oversight and kind of assisting where I can. And then this year, I got a chance to be involved with the Masters Fitness Championship. And I got to tell you, man, that kind of like reignited a fire, because the masters community, maybe it's just my age, but I show up, there, and we've got all these masters athletes, and they've got careers, most of them very successful in their careers. They've got kids, or grandkids, they've got all of these things, and they're doing fitness because they love it, and they're doing fitness because they love continuing to improve in all aspects of their life. And I was like, wait a minute, I could dig in deep with the masters community now, because you don't have some of the things that bother me, right? You don't have 6 hours a day of training that I'm worried about people breaking down their bodies and not enjoying their next 40 years. You've got more moderate training. You've got a little more understanding of priorities. You have less focus on the social media, all of those things. And so I have to tell you, when I was out at the Masters Fitness Championship in August, I was like, hey man, I might dig deep into coaching again, but really just focus on the Masters athletes, because I think we're speaking a closer language at this point.
Yeah, when you mentioned in the beginning, when you walked into that gym in 06 and you're like, there was mold and it reminded me of my boxing gym, it's just not that anymore, right? So it's like the athletes that are coming up now, they're not like you were, right? So I think looking at masters and you're like, I feel like their intentions are sound, right? It's like they have their priorities in order. They're not, trying to get, 100,000 Instagram followers. They do this because they love it. I think it kind of just brings back that feeling that you had in 06, where it's like, this shit just seems pure. Like the reason why they're doing this just seems a lot more pure. So I get that, man.
I think that's right. And don't get me wrong. I'll give it like a shout out. Kristen Alta is gonna start a program, the Krieger program, right, to talk about her training. Like, I'm excited for those guys. Like, I'm not trying to hold them back and say, like, you shouldn't have an Instagram follow, you shouldn't start your own programs. Like, we're excited that our athletes have done really well. They've built their brands, they've built their followings, and they do have stuff to offer, and they absolutely should. So I'm excited for them. It just, like, that doesn't fire me up, right? Like, what fires me up is just like the grittier, more organic, like, let's just come to the gym. Let's try to get better every day, and let's not worry about what people are saying and who's liking stuff and who isn't.
Well, it'll be virtual, CJ, but if you want to throw down with a couple of old guys, you could jump on with James and I every Sunday. We throw down, man.
Nice. I think James, how old's James now? Because he's not even 50. He's only a couple years older.
46.
40, yeah, he's only 3 years older. But I feel like he's like his fitness level is at least 23 years younger than me, and always has been. Like, I showed up in 2007 just because I thought it would be fun to hang out with people that did CrossFit, and this dude wins the games. I'm like, wow, you're really good at this.
How does fitness factor into your life now, CJ?
I will tell you, it's another silver lining of coronavirus, because I've been honest before, but the 10, 11 years of running a business, growing a family, it was like something had to give. Often it was my fitness, right? So that I could make sure I was coaching and running the business, and then making sure I put time away for my kids. And so coronavirus was kind of crazy, because we had to be at home. I was like, well, I have no excuse. I actually have time now to go work out. And so it's been fun to kind of re-explore. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to knock out Friendly Fran or Annie or any of these crazy ass workouts, right? I'm just enjoying getting in the gym and moving and doing our strength and structure program and doing our engine program and just making it fun, right? Like, if I jump into workouts in the gym, like our engine programs, which can be totally vomit inducing if you want them to be, like, my level of intensity is enough that I can still smile and high five gym members. I'm not trying to kill myself over that.
Reward the pacer, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you're able to get that 135 up, like Josh told you needed to be able to in 07, man.
as long as I can be as fit as I was in 2007.
Don't lose that, man. Well, thanks, man. That was awesome, man. And it was, gosh, this was such a good conversation. It was great to sit down and, we talk about impact a lot here, like a lot. And it's good to, chat with you and to kind of walk through all the impact that you've had in the CrossFit community and the fitness community and everything that you're doing now. So thanks, man. We really appreciate you taking the time and jumping on.
Anything for you guys, and James was such a great mentor and friend, and so I'm excited. I mean, the impact OPEX continued growth has just been awesome to see, and the amount of education, right? So on that note, right, like we're doing our Invictus University, and people have asked for years, like, hey, why don't you do courses or anything like that? And I always said, I'm like, well, because James was at least 10 years ahead of me in this industry, and he's doing such a good job. Like we just kept sending people there. We're like, well, I don't have to do that, So it's been exciting, and now it's like our curriculum will focus more on how we run our gyms.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, thanks, CJ.
Thanks, buddy. We appreciate it.
Stay with us for more backroom talk.
So CJ participated in the 07 games, and he was very keen on saying I was a participant. Participated in the 07 games, did a lot of cool things inside of the CrossFit community, built this awesome brand, and is now owning and running and is the visionary behind Invictus Fitness.
Yeah, I think anyone who's associated with the CrossFit world knows what Invictus is and, has heard of CJ at some point along the way. So getting to know a little bit about him and what his business actually does, like what is Invictus at its heart, that was really cool. And I did enjoy hearing from him that like one of the misconceptions he's trying to battle is the idea that Invictus is like very athlete heavy, just for competitive athletes, and hearing that his focus is really general population was interesting for me because, that's a misconception I had.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting just hearing his story and how he got into this thing. And it was so similar to a lot of people and how they got into the sport of CrossFit or owning a CrossFit gym, and kind of his professional background before getting into it, and hearing his response on, hey, would you do that again in 2020? And it was like, ooh, I don't think so, right? So, he took a leap of faith to get into the fitness industry, and I think a lot of gym owners, coaches had to make that decision at some point. So, there was just that piece was really interesting to me, just because we talk to coaches a lot, right? And it's like we talk to a lot of coaches that are like, do I want to do this thing? Do I not want to do this thing? I'm coaching part-time. I want to coach full-time. You're like, what do you do? They're like, I'm a lawyer. I'm a surgeon. It's like, ooh, maybe stay doing that because you're making a great living doing it. So he took that leap. So I think there's a lot to take out of that idea.
Yeah. One thing I find interesting about that transition from corporate America to being a coach or a gym owner, with CJ, it feels like there were actually some benefits to that, his education and his professional background and transitioning into coaching versus, coming from a strength and conditioning background. He obviously has a business brain. And, even if it wasn't this grand, like, master marketing plan that he had laid out, like, he was inadvertently doing SEO, putting a bunch of content out there and doing things that led to the establishment of the Invictus brand. So, yeah, I think there's something to that background as an attorney that probably had to do with his success as a leader of this business.
Yep, definitely.